Hi everyone, RFG here with the review for Unbeatable, a rhythm game at its core with an adventure game based on its story mode, developed by D-Cell Games and published by Playstack, available on Steam, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. Featuring B as the main playable character, you'll be battling enemies known as the Silence and agents of the Harmony and Resonance Management, or H.A.R.M, organization who are tasked to restrict music from being played in rhythm sections that simplify controls of the genre while still providing a challenge for players who might be used to other rhythm games. Unbeatable has two primary game modes, an arcade mode that has you choose between music tracks and a difficulty level as you try to achieve high scores and increase your player rank as you unlock more music and other features, while its story mode has you journey through an episodic adventure that progresses fairly linearly with mostly mandatory music tracks that appear throughout the playthrough. This mode plays like a modern adventure game where interacting with characters and the environment is crucial to finishing the story. The main rhythm controls of each mode follow the same method, but the modes can also feel like pretty separate experiences due to the focus of the story mode's adventure game aspects compared to the arcade's focus on unlocking more features by completing selectable tracks. Whichever mode you choose to begin with, the game's rhythm sections are based on a relatively simple control scheme that consists of attacking the Silence in the form of notes on the top plane or bottom plane, as they approach from the sides of the screen while you try to match the timing with the correct button presses. Defeating H.A.R.M agents and other characters follows the same logic of attacking or defending against them, though it's in the form of prompts on the top or bottom planes of the enemy, but unlike the Silence, their prompts scroll down or up from the top and bottom parts of the screen. Balancing all of these enemies and prompts might seem pretty simple on its own, even on higher difficulties, but like most other games in the rhythm genre, hitting these one-note timings is only part of the game. Holding timings that depend on when you hit an enemy and then release at the correct time, with mash timings where you hit an enemy constantly, also make up song patterns, along with hitting enemies on both vertical planes at once. Some enemies might appear in between the vertical planes with trailing notes behind them, where each should be hit with the correct timing using either of your two attacks, and unlike enemies, spike hazards can appear that need to be avoided by attacking in the opposite plane to avoid them when they appear. There are a few other note types, but more importantly is how beats screen position changes, as screen transitions usually give you a reasonable amount of time to react to where enemies or prompts will appear from. This usually starts with her being kept towards the left side of the screen, but will shift depending on the rhythm pattern to keep her centered when both sides have enemies approaching, or more towards the right side of the screen when most enemies are approaching from the left. On lower difficulties, this shouldn't be too hard to manage as the amount of enemies or prompts aren't too frequent and there won't be as much juggling between enemies from the left and right sides of the screen. But on higher difficulties, this becomes more challenging as there are more prompts and enemies that will appear. And while the sheer number of enemy notes that you'll have to manage can feel like the main challenge, it's really the beat map patterns and enemy combinations you'll have to balance with proper timing and maintaining your health to achieve high scores that makes for the experience of the rhythm game portions of Unbeatable. In battles or songs against the Silence, your timing is measured by how close your accuracy is to hitting an enemy in the hit line depending on which side of the screen they're scrolling from. Barely hitting an enemy compared to perfectly timing a hit might not affect you completing a song, but it can impact your total song score. Battling H.A.R.M agents or other characters in beatdown sections of the game follows the same logic, except the two hit lines are horizontal with one above and one below the enemy. Missing your attacks, not blocking an attack, or not avoiding spikes have a penalty of losing health, which is indicated by the heart meter located at the top of the screen. In arcade mode, you'll gradually heal throughout a song as long as you're consistently hitting your notes, but losing all of your health in either mode leads to a failure of a song. Depending on which mode you're in, failing a song can have different impacts, and I'll get into that later. There are a number of other differences to how the two modes operate. Arcade steadily allows you to progress by gradually beating songs to increase your rank, and depending on certain conditions will unlock new musical tracks and other features like menu palettes and or titles for you to customize your player profile. Going into your profile allows you to change your titles and lets you see a variety of stats like your total score, number of songs played, and more. In the song selection menu, you can see your scores based on difficulty on the bottom right, and information about the song like the artist and more right above. You'll be able to switch easily between difficulties and can filter what tracks are available by category and difficulty and sort them by name, level, or rank. Besides the difficulty levels, there are a few modifiers you can turn on or off that affect songs in different ways, and going into the song difficulty select screen allows you to adjust the beatmap scroll speed, which controls how fast the enemies will scroll on the screen. You can also choose between unlockable primary and secondary characters here. Completing or failing a song takes you to the score screen. Anything that you've unlocked after you get to the screen will be shown as your total score is calculated with your accuracy and a few other important stats, like the number of times you hit a specific timing of each enemy note displayed, along with the option to return to the song selection menu or to retry the song. You can also choose to immediately retry a track while in the pause menu while in the middle of one. If you're having trouble with a song, you can adjust the chart and timing offsets while in the options section, but if you want to make more adjustments, you'll have to be within the main arcade menus to do so. Going into the gameplay subsection of these options menus also allows you to make chart and timing offset changes, along with more adjustments like being able to change the color of several enemy note types, while the interface section is where you can change unlockable menu palettes. If you're curious about what else you can unlock, you can check the challenge board in the main arcade menu. There are 13 folios with 12 challenges for each within them. Each challenge gives a description on how to complete it, and completed challenges will add a more detailed description. Completed challenges will also let you view what the rewards were. Most of the challenge board is based on arcade mode, but there are some related directly to story mode. Story mode focuses mostly on exploration and interactions with characters in the environment, but still provides rhythm game sections throughout the adventure. While the mode begins with a relatively short intro sequence as you control Eve of the band One More Final, Beat becomes the primary controllable character for the story. The early episodes will be pretty linear with some chances to explore off the path, but you'll mostly progress by acquiring necessary items and interacting with the characters you come across. You do have a journal menu you can access that shows you your inventory, where you can examine your items, but most items will be used automatically when needed. Not all characters you see on screen need to be interacted with, but some can lead to side quests that can be completed for rewards. These side quests won't really appear until later episodes, where exploration becomes a bit more open, with each episode having you exploring largely different settings. A lot of the dialogue in the game is mandatory to go through, but you're given dialogue choices often enough to keep you paying attention to how you want to respond. A large portion of the story is voice acted, and I do think that includes many of the reactionary dialogue based on your choices. There are some puzzles that you will come across, though most of the story progress relies on you being able to follow the dialogue to meet a character or get to a certain location. Sometimes this might require a bit of platforming where your jump button comes in handy, and or could lead to a point of progress that can trigger an optional or mandatory rhythm game sequence. Rhythm sections of story mode are pretty varied, sometimes with mini segments that are scattered throughout the story like graffiti tags or for putting up posters, but can range to what the standard rhythm types you'd find in arcade mode are, or more beatdown rhythm sections against H.A.R.M agents where note prompts scroll from top to bottom and vice versa. Most episodes tend to end with more extravagant set pieces that can combine various styles of rhythm gameplay, often interspersed with cutscenes before ending. Each episode ends with a credits roll and gives you a note that you can view in your journal that expands on some elements of the story. Whatever the rhythm gameplay type you find in this mode are, they do stick to simple control schemes that usually follow the separate high and low lane pattern types, or really only require one button to properly time. Despite the variety in story mode you get from rhythm section types and quests you can find, and the variety you get from the song selection and completion goals in the challenge board in arcade mode, there are noticeable design differences between the two modes that I found questionable, but didn't make me forget what to appreciate between them. No matter if it's the arcade or story mode you decide to start focusing on, it shouldn't take too long to notice just how much heart was put into Unbeatable. From the game's rhythm section's animations, to the opening story segment where you follow Eve's intro section into the main story with Beat, the hand-drawn artwork is usually delightful to look at. 3D models are used for most of the game besides characters, but they never feel like they're clashing against the hand-drawn art. Backgrounds do a good job of making the environments feel distinct, with story mode given a good amount of variety in terms of locations you'll visit. Arcade mode will stick to Beats and the other unlockable characters' fighting game style sprites for most of the hand-drawn artwork, while story mode will provide a number of additional animations for Beat and other accompanying characters from other sections, with a number of animated cutscenes throughout the mode. And while the visuals in those cutscenes or in the moments of the game's set-piece segments may feel like that's where all of the highlights would be, there's something special about the visual spectacle that appears within key moments of certain songs, especially when playing on higher difficulties. Visuals, though, are a start of where certain differences in design choices between modes become questionable, with arcade mode sticking largely to one background versus the numerous ones you'll see in story mode. There is a song with its own unique background in arcade, and a few others that share more of a background filter, but in story mode, rhythm section backgrounds would depend on where you are in the story. This feels like a missed opportunity or odd choice, since there are a number of options you have in arcade that you don't have in story, like selectable characters and being able to choose enemy note type colors, making the number of songs specifically being set to one background more noticeable. The soundtrack is also a notable difference, with the story mode largely sticking to its theme of a forming band with Beat as the lead singer, but arcade mode gets a heap of additional tracks and a various range of styles. Granted, a good number of tracks are shared between the two modes. Curiously, some of these songs that appear in both modes do have different rhythm style game types and story, but can only be played one way in arcade. This happens most frequently with the songs in the beatdown style where you're fighting against another character, which get converted to the standard arcade beatmaps in arcade mode, though it seems strange to not have the option to switch between them there. It becomes more noticeable for some of the other types of rhythm sections from story mode, like the batting practice sessions at Whacktown, or the set piece sections of the game, which also get their own full arcade beat maps. As far as I can tell, these all have different beat maps based on difficulty, which is why it feels like a missed opportunity to not have them as an option as their story mode counterparts in arcade mode. That normally wouldn't be an issue on its own since story mode is always available, but this leads to some of the more questionable design decisions made that highlights the disparity between the arcade and story modes, or for story mode itself. Some of the most noteworthy are not being able to retry a song in story mode, and not being able to recover your health during certain songs like in arcade mode. You do recover health after a song is over, though that's not the issue. Instead, some songs that are failed are retried for you automatically and immediately, but some songs you fail will just move you along regardless. In essence, these issues wouldn't be too much to hold against it, but besides being inconsistent, it's exacerbated with an active autosave system, meaning that even if you wanted to retry a song that you failed that doesn't force you to retry, you might have to replay through an entire episode to get back to that one point. But this reveals the main problem being story mode's rhythm game pacing. This doesn't mean its overall gameplay pacing is troubling, but its rhythm sections can be pretty far spaced out, especially in the early episodes, though the pacing does get better in later ones. It can still feel uneven, as most episodes can be dominated by dialogue sequences, with progress dictated largely by the adventure gameplay. Not to mention that some of the rhythm gameplay sections in the story are optional, with many that are basically minigames that seem to be there for variety, or more to help even the pace. And since the mandatory rhythm sections don't always need to be beaten to move past them, it might make the gaps between rhythm sections seem more pronounced. It doesn't help that the intended difficulty of the game is hard, so those who might not be aware of having auto-progress moments might be wondering if hard was the correct choice for them, since that choice is initially given at the start of story mode, and even though you can change story difficulty, you can only do so while in the main menu. In general, I think it might be better for most players to actually practice in arcade mode for a few songs, especially if you aren't too adept at rhythm games, since there's a dedicated tutorial song there, and for the amount of time you can get used to the game before risking missing out on something in the story. I'd also recommend spending time in arcade mode before really getting into story mode because of how the pacing between the rhythm gameplay and the two modes work, specifically how I felt like I was genuinely improving my play versus feeling like I was sometimes just getting by when forced to. For those that are having trouble completing songs, there is an auto assist option that makes many of the rhythm sections automatically completable. However, while it's a nice quality of life option to have, it makes the lack of other adventure or story game quality of life options more noticeable, like lack of manual saves, auto text or dialogue advance, or a chapter select available after completing an episode or all episodes, which would help for those wanting to revisit certain sections of the story. The episode select option does make it a little bit more convenient to get back to sections that you might want to revisit, but if there are other story sections you'd want to get back to or keep track of, the 3 story save slots still means you might have to progress through large story segments to get back to particular sections only available in story mode. Despite what issues I have with story mode, I do think it is worth playing through. Not just for what you unlock for arcade mode and the relevant story mode challenge board folios within, but because the story itself is interesting and has a lot of passion put into it. That's something you'll see even in the opening moments of its soundtrack and introduction sections. Some parts of the story did feel a bit forced in order to move the plot forward, but its underlying themes do begin to develop fairly early on. There's also a decent amount of humor throughout its run. And though the mode's main issue is the rhythm gameplay pacing, there is an overall variety that helps alleviate that to a certain extent. There do seem to still be some specific story mode issues, but the developers have stated their dedication to improving multiple aspects of the mode, and that's not counting past improvements they've already made. Some of these aspects may not be able to be fixed with small patches, like the overall pacing of the mode itself, especially in the early episodes, but they have laid out what issues in story mode they do plan to address. Updates aren't solely reserved for story mode either. The developers have stated that they are planning to add more stage backgrounds for arcade mode, including some other general fixes and performance improvements. That being said, despite the issues mentioned, story mode itself is a decently length adventure, and since there are certain things that I think can only be unlocked through it, means you may have reasons to return to certain episodes. And of course, arcade mode is packed full of content to keep you playing before, during, and after story mode, where you have the challenge board, your player rank to increase, trying the vast and varied track list that's within, and that's not including just wanting to S rank or top scoring the songs you'll be unlocking as you go through the game. Unbeatable's unconventional rhythm game mechanics may not fully convert those who aren't rhythm game fans already, but its visual spectacle design, its varied soundtrack, and its fairly substantial story mode do a lot to make a case to try it, and its arcade mode gives you plenty of reasons to stick around for the long haul. If you're already a rhythm game fan, I think it's definitely worth the try, as I do think it's unique and challenging enough to keep you interested. It does need some bits of improvement to make it great, particularly in its story mode, but considering there are plans to do so means it's worth keeping on your radar, though I think what's here is already worth playing. And that's it for me. Let me know what you think below. Thanks. Bye.